Hello and welcome to the Silmarillion Film Project. Yes, I'm here, believe it or not. I mean, I know I've been on the last few episodes, but I haven't done the opening.
Right. This is Dave doing an opening for the first time in so long, I can't remember how
Like
to do it.
months. Yeah, yeah. It was like, well, oh yeah, right, yeah. So yeah, I'm here and we're doing the Silmarillion Film Project.
That's it.
Uh, and we are talking about we're breaking stories, like specific stories. I think we've descended. We were at like the last like few sessions we've been like at like 10,000 feet. I believe, didn't we like a month ago, didn't we like plan out like the next 10 years of
Yeah,
podcasts?
we did. We
Yeah,
did.
so now we're going to talk about this season.
Exactly.
We're just going to drop into a gentle, like, 5,000 feet.
That's right. Because we're still going to be looking at one of the broadest stories of the whole thing. That is our primary character, Hurin, and making sure that we're thinking through the story that we want to give him and how that's all going to kind of work in here. So
Yes, we're cruising altitude now.
That's it. Definitely. And then we'll come in for specific episodes, and we'll get towards episode outlines before too long. But yeah, we're gonna sort out some stories.
And then we'll throw Nick and Marie out with parachutes.
That's it.
It's going to be awesome.
That's right. See what they find on the ground there as we begin actually planning episodes. Yeah, excellent. All right, so before we get started, a couple quick announcements. We are in the middle of our fall fundraising campaign for Signum University, so this is the time of year when we both celebrate the people who have been so generous in supporting Signum over the years, and also remind people that now's a great time to donate to Signum University. As we get towards, we move into Giving Tuesday here, and then towards the end of the tax year, great time to remember to give to Signum University a fully tax-deductible donation. Anyway, just, but very, 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 very delightful, all of the support that we've received over the years, and so grateful for everything that people do. We could never do what we do without the support of our community. And I've told this story a couple times, but it was really kind of fun the way that our accrediting reviewers during our recent accreditation review were frankly puzzled by the kind of community that we have. They've never experienced this sort of thing with an online university. And even the accountant who was reviewing our business stuff at Signum couldn't really understand where our money came from. He was like, because they asked us to list our major donors, and I did, and he's like, where does the rest of the money come from then? And I'm like, from everybody else giving what they can. Like, it's the idea, like, no, we actually are a crowdfunded university. Like, that was not raising money, doing fundraising, that's normal for universities, but a genuinely crowdfunded university from a dedicated online community like this was something quite beyond their experience, and that was a lot of fun. So anyway, that's again, many thanks for everyone who donates there. And if you want to make a donation, you can go to signumuniversity.org/donate to make your donation. We also have a bunch of regional moots coming up. Our final moot of the fall season, Bayou Moot down in New Orleans, Louisiana, is happening on December 2nd. And then we will be, after that, in January, down in Sydney, Australia for Osmoot 2, our second annual Osmoot, which I'm very excited about. And in addition, actually, so the only spring one that for a while, the only spring one we've had was Sunshine Moot, scheduled for February. But we have had a very recent, just this past week, we have opened a bunch more, including Tex Moot on April 6th. And the UK Moot, we're going to be in York in the United Kingdom on April 27th next year. And then SoCal Moot on May 4th. in Carlsbad, California. So I'm just pointing out that I scheduled myself in York, England one weekend and Carlsbad, California the next weekend. But that's all right. It's all fun. I love being on airplanes. So there we go. And we even have a new one scheduled for the fall, whose registration is open next November 9th. Carolina moot, back to North Carolina. This will be in High Point, North Carolina. So down in your direction a bit there, Marie and Nick. Though actually there's still several others that may be happening within the next 6 months or so. And another one which will be in your direction, Potomac Moot. So we'll be down in the DC area for regional moot. And we're also looking at another one up in Canada this year, in Alberta this time, at the University of Alberta. Wild Rose Moot. So that'll be very cool. I can't wait to get up to Alberta. I'm very excited. Anyway, so lots of fun moot action happening. All right, now let's get back into our discussion. Again, today we're wanting to look at the big picture of the story of Hurin, right? So we start with a list of things. So let's just review this. So Marie, this is your first Hurin slide here, kind of reviewing things to keep in mind, right? Parameters.
Things that we know happen in his story.
Yeah.
What they mean for it is not on the slide.
Right.
Right. Like, just here's the thing that happens.
Here's the thing
he gets
that
married. He has kids. Like,
Right.
he goes to Gondolin. So
Right.
we have to build a story out of something.
Right. Okay, so let's just review this stuff. So we've got born the oldest child of Galdor, Lord of Dorloman, and his wife Harith. So of course his wife Harith, they were part of the double marriage, right? With which we did, right? We had the double marriage back in season 4, 5. 4 was pre-human, so that wouldn't have been awkward.
Yeah.
5, yes. Right. So Hurin is the product, right? One of the products, of course, of that connection. Raised as a youth in the forest of Brethil with his younger brother Huor and their double first cousin Hondir. So yes, the whole fostering thing we're not going to get that explicit. That is to say, like, it's not like we're going to be getting the decision to put them out to, but we're going to be joining them. We're going to be joining them in Brethil, but more importantly, it's just a thing we have to keep in mind, right? That Hurin has not really grown up in Dorloman, and that's something to remember as we're thinking about him and his presentation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out who he is. This is just to kind of establish his origin, his background.
Absolutely. Now, the first major event, of course, is the rescue / kidnap by eagles and being taken to Gondolin. This is, of course, one of those, and Tolkien does this all over the place, right? Embeds these like classic sort of fairy tale tropes in the middle of his first age stories. The mortal, crosses the border of fairy and finds himself in a strange place in lots of different ways, right? In this case, it's abducted by eagles and taken into fairy. In other places, we've seen echoes of that same, like, of course, we saw it with Beren and Luthien, right? Beren crossing into Elfland and seeing the young elf princess dancing. So anyway, there's lots of this kind of thing, and this is another classic example of this. If being a human teenager who is about to be killed and then essentially like blacks out and then wakes up in Gondolin, right? Like just essentially magically transported to Gondolin. That's about as pure I suddenly find myself in fairy kind of story as you can get, especially since, then the Fairy King tells him, and you will never leave and return to the mortal lands, right? And then he has to bargain for permission to return to the mortal lands. And anyway, so that's, Eddie, I think, an interesting little element to that story. And of course they remain in Gondolin for years. Right, this is not just a short visit.
Right. So in Tolkien's story, it's about a 1-year sojourn there. In our story, it's probably going to be closer to 3 years, but it depends when we decide they were taken.
Right.
It fits in the story anywhere after Sauron takes over Tolsirion, right?
Right.
And before Beren and Luthien go to Angband.
Right.
So. Right. That window is where the skirmish needs to be happening north of Brethil. I assume we're going to choose based on the age that we want Hurin and Hor to be at the beginning of the story.
Right.
So there's a window there. We can make them a little on the younger end or a little on the older end. Hurin's going to be somewhere in the 18 to 21 range at the skirmish.
Right. Okay. Then, of course, we know that after he emerges, his father is not yet dead. He talks to his father. He's sent back to Dorloman from Gondolin. Right, he returns to not to Brethil but to Dorloman. Sees his father again. Doesn't tell his father where he's been because he's sworn an oath not to tell anybody where he's been. But it's also not super hard to guess. And then his father dies relatively soon, so Hurin becomes Lord of Dorloman while still young, basically. We get the marriage of Hurin and Morwin, right? So we need to be thinking about not only the development of Morwin's character, but that relationship, how that relationship is going to emerge. She is in Dorloman the whole time, so right? While he's in Brethil, she's in Dorloman already?
No.
Is she down in Brethil still?
She was in Brethil after...
I know she was in, but weren't they leaving? Weren't they going up north?
Yes, at the end of last season.
Right.
After the wedding of Beren and Luthien. So while he's in Gondolin.
So
they moved to Dorloman.
Would have known her while he was in Brethil.
Right. So they were all young people in Brethil together. Okay. Hurin, Huor, Morwin, Rian, and the cousin Handir were all young people living in Brethil.
Right.
Then this abduction happens.
Right.
And we don't see that in season 6, but it would have happened during the time period of season 6. And then after that is when the people of Beor decide to move to Dorloman.
Right. Okay. All right.
So he would be surprised, like, what are these people doing here?
Right.
Why are they in Dorloman? That would be new to him.
Right.
When he gets there.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay, so then, and of course, after they're married, we have the birth of Turin and Lalaith, the older daughter, who, of course, is going to tragically die of the plague when the plague comes, which means, footnote, that's number 9, the death of Lalaith in the plague. So the plague is another thing. We either have to have the plague be a plot point, significant plot point of the season, or we've got to find another way to kill Lalaith, right? If we don't want to do the plague, but that's going to be a choice, right?
Yeah.
Then, of course, his role in the Union of Maedhros, especially his support of Fingon, and I always find it striking the kind of leadership role that Hurin plays, especially in the Nirnaeth itself. I know it's Hador is called peer of elven lords, but Hurin is the one who actually acts like a peer of elven lords in the Silmarillion, and so that's not just thinking about how is Hurin going to be positioned in relationship to the whole Union of Maedhros plan, but also kind of more deeply behind that, and thinking back to the death of Galdor and Hurin becoming Lord of Dorloman, what we do with the relationship between Hurin and Fingon, I think is important, especially with the way that Fingon is kind of the central figure, right? That is, you got Maedhros on the one hand, and you got Hurin, our main character, on the other hand, and Fingon is the link between the two of them, right?
Right. I mean, the whole reason the Union of Maedhros is happening is because Fingon is High King of the Noldor.
Right.
So
right.
obviously Fingon's the important
to
character
work with
here.
Maedhros. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, and then of course the Nirnaeth Ornoidiad himself and his famous "Day shall come again" moment in the Fens of Serech, and his ultimate capture by Morgoth, though the actual imprisonment and confrontation with Morgoth, we'd already decided that's going to be a beginning of season 8 thing rather than an end of season 7 thing. But probably having him overcome and dragged off is what a thing that we will do in this season.
We'll show that he survives.
Right.
But captive, right? Which will obviously completely transition his story into a different type of story. The story of a prisoner who's being defiant but has no hope of escape, that. Yeah. That's a very different story than what we're going to tell in this season.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously I see many people asking lots of very interesting questions, and we're going to come back to these things, right? This is not... This is just a survey. This is just to remind us of all of the elements that we know from the story that we must either, integrate and find ways to incorporate this into the story that we want to tell, or make the deliberate choice to exclude or alter some of these in order to make them work better. Okay. All right. So now we're equipped. Let's think about a few separate things here first. Actually, can we start with Gondolin? I kind of want to start with Gondolin.
Yeah, sure.
Let's start with Gondolin.
I didn't give you a Gondolin slide.
Okay, that's all right.
You can talk about it.
Let's talk about Gondolin. So, question number 1. This might seem a strange question, but we are going to make it just Hurin and Huor who are taken, right? We don't want to involve Handir. I ask this because, of course, it was originally Hurin and Handir who were taken to Gondolin in the earlier drafts of this stuff. And he changed it to Huor mostly because he was sort of developing Huor's character, Tolkien was at the time. And then Handir kind of got brushed aside. And the other reason I ask this is that we're not going to get so very many opportunities to develop the Brethil folks, right? I mean, until we get to Brandir with Turin, essentially.
Right.
So it might be interesting to get a little more time with Handir, and it's the only way I can think of getting more time with Handir, because we're not going to spend time in Brethil. It's going to be the frame of the first few scenes of episode 1, and then whisk off to Gondolin, and never shall we return to Brethil until Turin does, really.
Not never, because Brethil will take part in the Nirnaeth. So they're part of the Union of Maedhros. Someone's got to go talk to them and recruit them, and they've got to make decisions about who to send and where to send them.
Unless we don't have to, because the person that is doing the recruiting is somebody that's been with Hurin and Huor.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm wondering.
And then goes off to bring his people back with him.
It might be a way to kind of, because if imagining we do have the 3 of them taken instead of the 2 of them. I'm not suggesting we ditch Huor, obviously.
No. Yeah.
So if we take the 3 of them to Gondolin instead of just the 2 of them, that enables us to get to know Handir and get Handir on board, so that it would be much more efficient then to recruit Handir and the Brethil folks. Presumably Handir would go back to Brethil after the Gondolin experience, should he be so fortunate as to be invited by us into the Gondolin experience. But then he would go back to Brethil, and but Hurin and Hurin, he would already have that, right? So
right. Yeah, because I mean, I was originally thinking we could just put him in the skirmish,
right?
And then they get separated,
Sure.
and the two go to Gondolin.
Yeah.
But you're right. This would give them more screen time together. I think if we move in that direction, then we have to think about what we're doing with him.
Yeah.
Because it's very clear that Hurin and Huor going to Gondolin is majorly significant for not just them, but for like Gondolin and the future of Middle Earth, and a lot of like Ulmo is involved and all that stuff. So then we see what Hurin and Huor are gonna do. What's Hondir gonna do?
Well,
like if he's part of this, he needs to have a fate.
Yeah. Well, in part, one of the things that kind of that gently inclines. I'm not passionately inclined towards this idea, and gently inclined towards this idea, in part because I was intrigued and to some extent almost moved by rereading recently in the War of the Jewels, the Wanderings of Hurin stuff, right? Which is later, and we'll get to that stuff. But one of the take-homes, right, that I kind of took from this was seeing the time and the world-building effort and things that Tolkien was lavishing upon the people of Brethil, right, in that stage of the story, which felt to me almost like a makeup situation from Tolkien's perspective, in the sense that Haleth is awesome, right? I mean, if your civilization boasts Haleth, you've got a claim to fame that nobody's going to argue with, right? But post Haleth, the people of Brethil kind of get the shaft. Like they're kind of the invisible partner in the whole three households of the Edain. They're always there, and they get referred to a couple times, and they come into the story of Turin. But it seems to me almost symbolic that the only like named plays a significant role is lame Brondir, right? And like poor unfortunate crippled Brondir, being the like poster child of the latter days of Brethil, seems like unfortunately apt, right? Because like, the people of Beor get Baron, and of course the people of Hador and the House of Hador and Dorloman get Hurin and Huor, and through them Earendil and Turin. So there's plenty of representation there, and even Turin, of course, being also the son of Morwin and favoring his mother, is totally repping both of those two houses, right? But although he technically has blood from the... Anyway, I feel like it's the forgotten house of the Edain in some ways. And so raising its profile a little bit, that feels to me like a plus. Now, Hondir... yeah. Anyway, yeah, so it would put things... I'm not sure, Marie, that I am prepared with a definite answer to the question. If if Hondir comes to Gondolin, what is the result, right? Like,
I didn't mean we needed to have an answer like pat and ready to go. Just that if we make the choice, let's throw him in the group and let him be along, but like, then we need to give him a fate. Right. There needs to be something for him, even if it's just to die horribly in the Near-Knife. Like
dying horribly in the Near-Knife is good. Setting up so that, and again, this is another thing. In the Silmarillion, I always feel like Brondir kind of comes out of nowhere, right? I mean, like, it's not nowhere. We get a genealogy. We just don't care about it very much, right? It's like it's who keeps track of it, right?
What if?
Okay.
What if he's injured? What if Hondir is injured, not killed, in the Near-Knife, and returns to Brethil and changes his name?
No, he's...
Why no?
He's Brondir's father.
He's the wrong generation. Yeah, he's the wrong generation.
Okay, but
Hurin survives.
Yeah, but we need Brondir.
No, but it'd be like son. Way too creepy. Yeah,
because the whole thing is it's a love triangle with Niniel.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, okay. All right.
We can't have.
We can't have Brondir.
You can't have someone who's her literal father's age.
Macking on the baby daughter.
All right.
Super creepy. Yeah.
I mean, we could. It's just no one would be rooting for him.
No. Yeah.
Anyway, he is the father of Brondir the Lame.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's
so
the father.
Whatever we do with him.
But see, that's so. Okay.
Is the love triangle necessary to the story though?
So hang on.
That Niniel has a choice who's not her brother. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Here's my Brondir idea, right? Which is not a digression, because I think it's what is his destiny? Like, what's the point of Hondir? And I think the point is like what should have been from Brondir, basically. I think that Brondir is a tragic, what should have been, what ought to have been kind of story, right? Okay. Brondir ought to have married Nienor. Like the House of Hador and the House of ought to have been rejoined, even though they're kind of second cousins. But
they are, yeah.
That's okay. Second cousins.
Humanity's only been around for a few hundred years. There's not that many genetic defects to spread around.
Second cousins is all right.
Preferable to what did happen.
Right.
Exactly. Compared to siblings. Oh man, yeah, exactly.
Second cousins is much
Who's going to complain about the second cousin? Yeah.
No, I mean, second cousins is not even incest for elves, who apparently would care more about that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, second cousins is fine.
Second cousins is legit. Anyway, but it's not only that he's like that he ought to have been, but I mean, I would even be willing to invent a kind of not a full-blown like Earendil style messianic tale, right? For him.
Well, I mean, any more than Tuor versus Turin. I mean, they're different stories, obviously.
Yes.
So Brondir needs to be different than the other two, and not in a also not Earendil. Like he's not like could have been Earendil but wasn't. No, like he has to have his own story.
Yeah, but that there's.
But it can be one of what could have been.
Yeah, that there's some kind of like potential high destiny for Hondir's line, right? For Hondir and Brondir, and the line that was, but it just the whole thing fizzles out, and it's, I'm not saying it's all Turin's fault. I'm just saying it would be one of the tragedies of the Turin story, right? That because it's one of the things, of course, about Turin, right, is that it's not just that he goes around and wrecks everything. I mean, he kind of does, but it's not only that he goes around wrecking things. It's like everything that he touches turns horrible, right, and like withers and dies, even when it's not his fault completely.
That's why he's super relatable.
Totally. So the idea that through the Turin story, we could be bringing into fulfillment or bringing into flowered, not great metaphors here. We could be having the final stages of the tragic loss and dissolution of the potential great destiny of the House of Hondir. I don't know exactly what it would be, but something, right? And
so the love triangle does present some problems, right? Because what do you do? Does Brondir actually have some sort of relationship with her, and she, like, does she have a relationship with both of them and chooses Turin, or does Brondir want a relationship with her in the same way that Myelin wants with his cousin?
Yeah,
and he gets rebuffed because then it's like, well, no means no, dude. Like she's not into you,
right?
And if
that's the tragedy, and he respects that.
But if he accepts it, then
but
if he just accepts it, then it's not a part of the story anymore.
No, it is. It totally is. I mean, like, his love for Niniel is part of the story right up until the moment of her suicide.
Right. So, like, we don't have to do a full-blown, like, Grey's Anatomy, interpersonal dynamics dragged out for 2 seasons about this particular love triangle, but we could incorporate it, and it doesn't mean that they're just gonna get over it because Niniel decides to marry Turin. We know that Brondir goes to her before the wedding and says, you shouldn't do this. And she says, but I'm gonna. And he apparently is okay with it. But why are you warning someone right before their wedding? Like, you're not really okay with it, right? So, well, I mean, there would be a dynamic there. There'd be a story there.
And that she likes and respects him. And she might have been into him if not for the fact that Turin was there, right?
And rescued her. Turin's the one who rescues her. That's part of what...
And he's Turin. I mean, he's studly and gorgeous and everything.
And not Brondir the Lame.
And not Brondir the Lame, exactly. Yeah, and so she has this, like, she totally friend zones him, right? But they're close. And, but then again, so Marie, there are those 2 really great moments, right? The one, the warning, right? Where he is, like, totally not wrong, right? He is emphatically not wrong to warn her against the marriage, and yet, of course, it's totally and sort of.
But he's also
biased.
missing the most important piece of information about why it's wrong. Because it's other than the fact that they are brother and sister, it's not really.
Well, that's the point. Is he's trying to warn her, and she doesn't go along with the argument. Right. Well, that's the thing. Is obviously the reason he's trying to warn her is not that.
Right.
But he can have a foreboding that she really shouldn't marry this guy and nothing good will come of it, which is what he tells her. And she's like, "Really now? Funny that you have that foreboding. I'm gonna go get married."
Right.
Like the fact that she knows he's into her is why she ignores the warning.
Because she. Yeah,
it seems groundless.
Right. What seems just biased. Yeah. Basically.
Right.
Of course, he feels that way.
And this is going to be the second love triangle that we deal with Turin, because there's already the Gwyndor-Findula situation, which is very similar in that Gwyndor is broken from his time in Angband and looks aged and not like
lame,
beautiful young elf that he once was.
Exactly.
So we're gonna see Turin put up as like, oh, but this guy compared to people who have no chance against him, even though Turin's really bad news.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure that the counterfactual is enough to be the great destiny that was laid upon Hondir.
Well, I don't even know what the great destiny was.
By his presence in Gondolin.
No, as I say, I'm not. We can. I'm not even proposing what the great destiny would be. I just think it would be cool for them to have one, and whatever the great destiny is or might be, falls to pieces with Brondir
maybe
and Turin, and their line dies. Basically, I mean the direct line dies.
Yeah.
With Brondir.
Okay.
Murdered by Turin.
This could be.
I mean, that Hondir and Hurin, their sons kill each other. Like Hurin's son kills Hondir's son. That's kind of a big deal. I'd kind of like to set that up,
Right. And the only way I can see putting them on screen together enough is either sending Hondir to Gondolin or making part of Hurin's story that he has to go back to Brethil and spend time winning over the people of Brethil to this new war plan, and we're following Hurin because he's the guy who does that.
Right.
But that's not necessarily a story we would want to tell either. Right. So I'm not sure that gives us any benefit.
No, it's very clear that placing Hondir in Gondolin is the more elegant,
more efficient
way
to
get that. Yeah, for sure.
And because it would also, because here's my other concern, it would be possible to develop their relationship and Hurin's leadership as like he rallies the people of Brethil, and then Hondir is like his right hand dude through the Nirnaeth, right? Except he's already got a right hand dude, and I don't want Hondir to be competing with Hur, right? So
right.
Yeah, who's already I mean, here's the thing. Like, the way that I'm kind of picturing Hur and have been as we've been thinking this through is I imagine him as this really tall, good-looking guy who's very quiet. Right? Like, Rion's just like all about him, right? Because he's really handsome. He's
handsome, quiet, sensitive,
brooding a little bit.
Yeah, sure,
like
sure.
You know, that guy. And so maybe he's not necessarily Hurin's right-hand guy when it comes to standing in the room, in the war room, right?
Right.
You can see them being side by side in battle for sure, but he's not. Hur is not Hurin's peer. Hondir is.
Right.
Okay.
I see what you mean. So you're wanting
Who's a younger son,
keeping him in like the younger brother role, essentially. Yeah.
Like, he's got Hurin's back for sure.
Yeah.
But he's not going to step up and open his mouth in council with the elves. That's not really his role.
Right. Having Hurin and Hur both espousing a particular course of action wouldn't necessarily count as 2 votes in the way that it would if Hondir and Hur, or Hurin rather, were both. Yeah. I can see that. I can see it. Now again, and I was feeling the qualification you were making, Nick, that like in suggesting this, you're not saying we're like minimizing or relegating to the margins.
No, he's got his own personality, but also I can also see like his goals are very different from Hurin's.
Yes.
Like, he is changed by his presence in Gondolin in a very, very different way.
Yes.
Which is one of the reasons why he gets that moment of foresight as they're bidding farewell to Turgon.
So let's think about that question then, because this seems to me like this feels to me like the difference between me being kind of interested in this idea and me becoming enthusiastic about this idea of sending Hondir to Gondolin. And that is, how are they going to respond to Gondolin? Right? What is the Gondolin effect? So we have 4 questions to answer. Well, 3 to 4, depending on how many humans we decide to send, right? What is the Gondolin experience? What is its effect on Hurin? What is its effect on Hur? What is its effect on Gondolin? And then, optionally, what is its effect on Hondir if Hondir goes too? Do we want a 3rd scenario? And here, in part, I'm kind of thinking of the parallel that I can't help but remember is the way that we had the 3 houses of the Edain and their relative relationships with, playing out the different possible scenarios.
And before that, the 3 ambassadors to Valinor.
Yeah.
Like, this is a 3 ambassador situation more than anything.
Yeah, because there are elves, human elves, and dwarf elves, and there are elf humans, human humans, and dwarf humans. And
we're not even getting into the human hobbits, elf hobbits, and dwarf hobbits that we will get later on, right? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. No, the 3 is it's a thing. Like, this is
right.
So right, but if we can think of a really compelling way, like of a 3rd, let's start with Hurin and Hur. Let's start with Hurin and Hur, because those we know, right?
Do we though?
Well, no. I'm saying those we know are going and are definitely going to have a reaction.
So Hurin comes out of this thinking, I'm the guy.
Yeah.
He's not the guy, but the guy's coming. And Hur is going to figure that out. Hur comes away from this really contemplatively. Like, this experience really impacts him in a way that so the world is a lot bigger than he thought, and there are things in this world that matter a lot more than he was really aware of.
Okay. So Hur, what he essentially what you're suggesting is that we use Huor's Gondolin experience in episode 1 as a direct setup, essentially, for his sacrifice of his life. Which, of course, Hurin and Huor both are sacrificing their lives with the men of Dorloman in the Fens of Serech. But there's we can make a distinction there. I think. But so, is that what you're thinking of?
Huor has almost like a mystical experience, I would say.
Right. So,
yeah, I'm going to say we're either going mystic or poet with him in this version.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So, like, it is in Gondolin that he gets the first glimmers of what will manifest itself as the prophecy that he utters in the Fens of Serech.
He might actually, when he's talking as they're planning leading up to the near night, he might sound a little bit like Frodo during and after the scouring of the Shire.
You mean like when he's prophesying Sam's children, kind of moment?
Yeah, sort of. So, not necessarily that, but just kind of like this idea that there's more out there. I'm not just sacrificing myself for my people and my family and my brother who's standing beside me, and it's for kind of like this greater good in a sense, but like this something bigger.
Yeah. As G.D. Tarian was suggesting, if Huor is the spokesperson for Estel among the humans, basically, and that's what he gets at Gondolin, right? He emerges from Gondolin with Estel, which takes that particular form. Like, he realizes not just like his sort of general conviction, right, that what should be shall be, and that everything is gonna work out, will crystallize into this realization, right? From you and from me, a new star shall arise, right? That he gains in the moment of his death or before his death, an insight into how, the Estel is going to work out in the lives of their families and such. But I like that idea of Huor being the voice of Estel, basically.
Which means he needs to be a voice of wonder in Gondolin. His experience of Gondolin is just like, wow, this is amazing, and I am blown away.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the things that I think that through that we can have Huor appreciating is, of course, we remember that Gondolin is deliberately set up to look as Valinorian as possible. It's a scale model, right? Of like Valinor,
Tyrion.
Right?
Yeah.
So that Huor has this sort of quasi Valinorian, like he's the one who appreciates most that element of it, right? That he's, because they've all met elves, right? This is not like crazy to any of them. It's, in that sense, of course, the going to Gondolin is not like a traditional trip to fairy situation, right? Because they already met elves. Like it's kind of, it's not like it's no big deal at all, but anyway, like it's a known thing.
I just had a realization.
But he has a different experience in Gondolin. Go ahead.
I think that it's from Hurin and Huor that the rest of the Elvish world outside of Gondolin first get the actual story of what happened in Fingolfin's duel. Because nobody else saw it, and so Thorondor tells the story of what, because he saw the whole thing.
Yeah.
Tells the story to Turgon.
Yes.
And Hurin and Huor are presumably there by that point?
No.
No? When did they get rescued?
So the Dagor Bragollach ends.
Yeah.
And then Fingolfin dies.
Right.
And then at least a year after that, Sauron takes over Tolsirion.
Okay.
The Eagle kidnapping situation, the skirmish that they're involved in, happens after Sauron gets Tolsirion.
Okay. Yes. All right.
So we're at least a couple years after Fingolfin's death. However, if the Eagles have told Turgon, then the people of Gondolin know. And that's a story that could be told. It would still be recent history.
Yeah.
And a big deal. So it could still be told to them in Gondolin. The thing is, though, we were definitely implying that, like, the whole world was watching while that duel was going on.
No, we
did
weren't.
imply that.
No.
Yes.
Well,
I was implying that they were aware that something
there was
an
happening. Awareness.
Yeah, which
not that they were
screen.
actually watching it.
Of course they weren't actually watching it, but my point is, when you have people who are somewhere else reacting to a thing that is happening on screen, it means that they're aware that it's happening.
Okay, but the first thing, I don't think anybody would come away from that situation thinking that all those people knew the blow by blow. That's the first thing. But that's not really the point. That's not where I'm going with this.
You'd think would be kind of interested in this story.
Yeah, I think that Hurin could get inspired by the story of Fingolfin. Right? He is following. So this is the myth that Fingolfin creates. Right? That was a big part of kind of where we wound up going with that is Fingolfin his realization that he's standing in the mythic moment, right?
Yeah.
And he creates this myth for everybody else, and Hurin gets moved by this.
Okay.
To make the decision, I'm going to be a part of that.
And this is why
that can work.
Ends up pro Union of Maedhros and at Fingon's side saying, okay, now's the time.
Yeah.
And this also would explain the please Turgon let us go because I want to do the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it also explains one of the reasons why he's so high in the councils of Fingon, because like he's got the direct like
connection to Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I like that. By the way, I really love that GD Taurian just posted a really brilliant thing. Right?
Yes.
Huor equals Vanyar equals Beor.
Yes.
Hurin equals Noldor equals Hodor. Haldir equals Teleri equals Haladin.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. Yeah.
Love it. That seems that works. That fits in with. I mean, of course, that almost literally fits in with Huor being like the poet figure, right? If he's parallel to the Vanyar. But again, thinking about the three ambassadors and the other threes. Yeah. Okay. Starting to get enthusiastic, but okay. So
Handir.
So Huor is lost in wonder, and he has a vision as of Valinor itself, right? He now understands. They've heard of the light in the west, like Huor is like the light in the west is here. Like I've seen it now, right?
Yes.
And
I am now fighting on the side of the Valar.
Yeah, exactly. He's and that he becomes ever after contemplative, poetical, mystical. That seems a very appropriate react. That someone should have that reaction, right? That someone should be so struck with wonder that they never recover, right? And this would be a reason for him to be not like really vocal, right? All the time. Hurin is motivated to action, as you say. He relates to the story of Fingolfin, right? And his desire to lead and to strike against Morgoth and to be involved in the war against Morgoth directly is inspired by his time there.
Yeah.
Handir.
So one way to look at this would be, who in Gondolin are all these people talking to and interacting with?
Yes.
Because obviously I want Huor to at least encounter Idril.
Well, I was thinking
obviously
that too. Yeah.
And
exactly.
I feel like Idril would be really good at inspiring the mystical wonder of life in human that she just met for the first time.
Yeah. The only thing we have to be like super careful of is not to make that weird.
Yes.
Right.
Well, he's very young.
Yeah, true.
He's 3 years younger than
He's
his
like
brother.
13 or something. I mean,
no,
there's a
yeah, but he's a teenager.
He's a teenager.
So she could just be like, oh, people your age are like children among the elves.
Wasn't it then? I mean, there's at least one version of the story, isn't there, where Hurin lies about his age, or like whatever, he's allowed to come even though he's like only 14 or something, or something like that. And
yes, whether or not that fits our timeline is another story. But he is 3 years younger than his brother. So if Hurin is 18 to 21 when they get there,
15 to 18.
15 to 18, exactly. Yeah. So obviously I'm Idril for Huor, and it sounds like Turgon is going to have some personal conversations
with Hurin.
Hurin.
Totally.
So that leaves Maeglin.
I was thinking about that.
Also, Glorfindel and Ixalion. I mean, we do have other cool Gondolin.
Yeah.
Someone could end up stuck in the library with Pengalad. I'm not saying it has to be Maeglin.
I was thinking that too, though. I was thinking that
but there is Maeglin.
There is Maeglin.
So we got to think about how Hondir would feel on his initial exposure to Gondolin, because at least Hurin and Hurin have probably at least been to Mithrin at some point.
Paradithal, probably.
Like they've seen an elvish city before, right? They live in a relatively civilized place in comparison to Brethil. Hondir has none of that. He has no context.
And he's from the Haladin, who are the most elf-averse of the Idai.
Right. So, like, his first response is going to be pretty hostile.
Well, that's the obvious perspective we're lacking, right? If Hurin is like, yes, like, I am part of this world and I'm going to make an impact, and Huor is Mr. Mystical Contemplative, I have seen a higher truth, then we need somebody, don't we need somebody to be the mortal who is like, I am creeped out by all of this, and I want nothing to do with his help. Right. Please help me escape, someone. Yes.
At the very least, what I was thinking was that he sees Turgon's, not xenophobia, but his it's close to xenophobia, but it's not quite that.
Not xenophobia.
Okay, fair enough. But he sees that and sees the negative impact of that, and that kind of drives him to move the Haladin away from that. Yeah. To devastating effect, obviously, but but the idea that the realization that we can't just hide in our enclave and hope that the bad guys never knock on the door.
Right. That could be an almost defiantly, like, anti-elf stance on his part.
It's not,
but he's very self-reflective about it. He's like, oh, this is what we're doing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so he might have an experience with somebody who realizes this is all going to become terrible. Like, he might have an interaction with Idril that kind of makes him realize, okay, it's not the elves that are the problem necessarily. Like, it's this idea that somehow we can kind of hold on to the world the way that we want it to stay.
So he could be the one that challenges Turgon's point of view. Because Hurin's not going to challenge.
Well, Hurin wants to leave. Like, he wants to be involved.
But he's very enthusiastic about everything he's been told. So he can't be like, but Turgon, you're doing this all wrong. Right? Like, he has to say, I want to go fight. But he's got to be respectful of Gondolin if that's what inspired him to go fight. If Hondir was like, get me out of here the whole time, and then it's finally like, look, I see what you're trying to do. I'm from Brethil. We get it. But this is all wrong. Like, this is going to not work out. If he actually says something like that to the king, it's going to seem very like, what a terrible guest you are.
Yeah.
But it could be, he could say something that sticks with Turgon later and makes him go, yeah, I kind of need to.
Because this is the fourth question, the impact on Gondolin. Right.
It's right. Because somebody has to say something that makes Turgon go, you know what? I should maybe join my brother for this giant fight we're having.
Right. Yes.
Like, somebody has to be the inspiration for that. Even if Turgon didn't want to hear it at the time.
Yeah, like Hurin, like he's not necessarily like he's got to be savvy enough to realize that maybe I don't tell the king that he's wrong about his kingdom. Like, he could be wrong about us. That's different. Like, I can say, look, I gotta go. I can't.
Yeah, we're mortals. It's just different for us. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But if Hunter's been going like, get me out of here the whole time, if he's been anti-Gondolin from the beginning, he might not be as politic in how he expresses himself.
Yeah.
He would remember Brethil is crude even by Edain standards.
Yeah.
Right. So, and Gondolin is like the other end of the spectrum, right?
Right.
Complete other end of the spectrum. I mean, he's going to feel extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a city, and he was raised in a very rural area.
And way beyond city. It's like magical
totally different culture.
city.
It's
right?
heaven.
Yes. Yeah, but not a heaven that he's comfortable in. Like he is not happy there. He is Yeah. No, I like this. It feels like there does need to be, because again, I'm thinking back to the fairy paradigm, right? That mortal impulse that says, I have gone into a place where mortals were not meant to be. Yeah. I'm gonna be destroyed or whatever. Like, let me out and let me go home. Whether
he could not want to eat their food.
Yeah.
When they first show up.
Yeah.
Like he could not want to eat the food.
Don't eat the food.
Like
you'll never be able to go home.
Right. Yeah. You're gonna get stuck here. And who's like, no, that's not how it works, dummy.
Right, exactly. What a peculiar superstition. Yes.
But that concept of like, I don't belong here, and I better not.
But it would be really great to like bring that piece of mythology into it. I think that would be really cool. Because you don't get a lot of opportunities for that.
This also doesn't this kind of, I feel like this is almost necessary to help with the why do they get to go home sort of like storyline. Mm-hmm. It's never the at least in the published Silmarillion, I feel like it feels a little too easy. Turgon agrees to
very conveniently. Turgon lets this one guy go when no one's ever been allowed to leave before.
Yeah, exactly. This feels.
I mean, to be fair, these people had no idea how to get in here.
Right. That's the technicality, right? Yeah.
That's the technicality. Yeah.
But I think like having a character who just is like where it's just clear this person doesn't belong, and if we force him to stay, it might cause problems.
Right.
It gives Turgon more reason to actually want to allow it. So also, do we have a character either in the published Silmarillion or in what we've adapted so far? Do we have like a human character who has this reaction to fairy? I don't feel like we really do. Like it seems like usually
not this reaction.
Yeah. There's sort of the political, like reaction, but there isn't sort of the like, whoa, I'm really creeped out. Like that's not really this isn't presented much.
Without that, with one significant confounding variable to the situation, Baron coming into Doriath has elements of that, right?
That's true.
Again, the confounding variable is Luthien, right, whom he's fallen in love with, and so that changes the game pretty significantly as far as he's concerned, right? But nevertheless, like the whole like out of place, vagabond, worn down with travel and suffering, and now like before he knows it, getting brought into the hall of the Elf King, right? That's there's an element there of the out of place mortal in fairy. Right.
Yeah. But I think we can do it differently here. And,
very much. Yeah.
And emphasize that aspect of the story even more so.
Yep. For sure.
So there you go. There's your reason of why Hundir gets to go to Gondolin.
I think we need him.
So I'm okay with it as long as we come up with a fate for him at some point.
Yep. And
where there seems to be some movement of either Ulmo or Manwë or somebody wanted him there.
Yep.
For some reason. That's all I'm asking for.
The fun thing is we don't even need to come up with the actual reason, right? Because if it's not going to be fulfilled.
Yeah,
but it could fulfill some, like there should be some kind of thing that happens.
There needs to be something. Even if it's implied there could have been more or different or whatever, there has to be something.
Because at the end of the day, Iluvatar wants him there. Yeah. And Iluvatar does not. His plans work out.
Right. Right.
Maria, when you say someone has to want him there, I suppose you don't mean Corey, right?
Because I want him there. I'm convinced.
I'm noticing that.
Yeah.
Yes, I meant within the story. But yeah, I think it would be good to have a third perspective, and I think it will allow us to do things we couldn't do with just Hurin and Huar. So,
well, and if we follow the trajectory of Tolkien's later thought, that is, I'm not saying we necessarily do all the stories from the Wanderings of Hurin and stuff, but, and by the trajectory of Tolkien's later thought, I mean actually developing a later story about the Haladin and what happens with them. Right.
I was about to say, we do need to destroy everything in Beleriand by the end of the first age.
Yep.
Including Brethil, including the Haladin. Like, they need it. Their story will need an end.
And
a sad, unhappy, tragic end, but we will need one.
Needless to say, but
right.
But of course, then we also need to bring a pack of refugees to Sirion, to the Havens, right? Exactly. That was the other thing I was going to suggest, by the way. As far as destinies are concerned, something Havens of Sirion and possibly Voyages of Earendel related, right? Like what if the descendant of Hondir, well, he doesn't have a direct descendants because his son.
Just because his son is the only one who's named on the family tree doesn't mean that there weren't 3 unnamed daughters that we can give him if we need to.
True. We can give him daughters. Yeah. So if one of his descendants, at the very, one of the easiest things would be to have one of his descendants be one of the 3 mariners with Earendel in the end, right? Is going to make it to Valinor, right?
That would be the kind of thing where I'm like, okay, that pays off him being in Gondolin in the first place. Okay.
That's an easy thing. And especially if that guy, I mean, by the way, talk about your minor characters who are ripe for much larger roles in the SilmFilm version, right? The 3 named mariners who don't get off the boat in Valinor are prime candidates. And of course, especially if we're going to do a bunch of like Voyages of Earendel business.
Right.
He could be.
Those are the guys who are having those adventures.
Right. He could be pretty significant. So, yeah.
All right. So there's possibilities.
Yeah, plenty of possibilities, and it would be, again, like in the published Silmarillion, when Brondir dies, we're done with Brethil.
Yes.
I mean, it's not even really. We don't even barely even get alluded. It barely gets alluded to ever again.
Yeah, it's over.
Yeah. So we
will need to end it in a different way. Or that actually ends the story.
Again, Tolkien's own impulse in his later writings was to actually sit down there for a while and be like, what happens in the future generations? And some of those Haladin characters from the Wanderings of Hurin are kind of fun. That we could actually integrate in those intermediary seasons when Brethil will be falling and moving down with the refugees. But anyway, yeah. So yep. All right. So Hondir, he's coming on the trip. Love it.
Okay.
The 3 ambassadors, the 3. This, I think, we need to not break up the 3s. Love it. Okay.
And then we'll have 3 eagles to carry them, of course. And I've never heard of any other quantity of eagles carrying anybody around at any point.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. Yep.
Can't believe you pulled it off, Corey.
There we go. No problem. But it's going to save time later on because
it will allow us to do some interesting
we
things.
don't even need to go to Brethel anymore. We can just have Hundir show up with the people at the Near Ninth and explain it. Okay. Perfect. So I was going to think of a second. Oh, let's the Gondolin question, the changing Gondolin question, Turgon's mindset question. It would be cool if basically Turgon is affected by all three of them in some way or another, right? The anti-isolationism stuff explicitly from Hundir, the follow in the footsteps of your dad thing from Hurin. And even from Huor
could be a reminder that this is not Valinor. Because the more Huor's like, I've found Valinor.
Right.
And Turgon's
like actually,
yes, that's the whole reason I made this place was to be just like Valinor. But the more Huor's like, yes, this is it. He's like, it's totally not.
Actually, yeah. No,
so it could be a reminder to Turgon that everything he's built that he loves isn't what this is all about.
Yep.
Specifically because Huor loves it so much.
Yep.
Like,
yeah. It both, in one sense, of course, like you always sort of like appreciate things anew when someone is appreciating
discovers
them
it
like that. Yeah. So there would be that element, but you're right. That would have a kind of a double edge for Turgon, wouldn't it? Even a conversation between Turgon and Huor, right, in which Turgon basically ends up saying, really, actually, I hear you, and I'm delighted that you're that you see this and that it makes you feel this way. But man, actually, if you'd really see, I mean, he could be looking at the trees, right? The gold and silver trees,
the image of the trees,
and being like, oh, it's the most beautiful thing ever. And Turgon's like, actually, yeah, wow, like this is not actually to be compared to the two trees themselves. Yeah.
So just some reminder to Turgon that the whole love not too much the work of your hands thing.
Yeah.
Like this is him realizing through someone praising him and telling him how wonderful it is. Like Huor doesn't need to be negative or detracting or trying to gainsay him in any way at all and still give him that.
Right. And I love the way that sets up, because it's clear that something has to really change in Turgon's heart later on when he is loving too well the work of his own hands and he is going to reject the message of Olmo, right? And so setting up, showing him not at that place right now, so that we can work
bring him
out
there later.
Yeah, how that changes. But
well, I mean, the Near Ninth will have an impact. The death of his brother. I mean, at this point, he's lost his wife, his father, his brother, his sister.
Yeah. Ironically, it's when he becomes High King that things change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. That's great. All right. I just wanted to think through Turgon there a little bit more. And we can also show some impact on others. I mean, Idril's going to be, there's going to be something that's going to be sparked in her as well. She may be the first one to have some kind of foresight, right?
Well, these are the first humans they've seen.
Yeah.
Because Gondolin was founded before the mortals showed up.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
They never met humans before.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Idril will be affected. Maegwyn's not going to be a fan, right?
No.
And
especially not when they're allowed to leave.
Yeah, especially not when they're allowed to leave. Yeah. I want to bring in Glorfindel in some setup ways.
He's our frame character, right? So definitely we'll want to see him in the main story as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's it gonna do though?
In the first episode, not much, but in the final episode, I'm pretty sure we can find something for him.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay, great. So, in discussing Gondolin, we've also made progress in thinking about Brethil and its role, and also in thinking about Huor and Huor's character. Now, how is Huor going to be? So if Huor becomes this sort of kind of contemplative poet dreamer character right after this, he's still going to be supporting his brother, but we would have him be essentially the person whom Hurin himself goes to, right, for
he's
counsel.
A good listener.
He's a good listener. Again, very much not like his brother's ally, but his brother's counselor and supporter, right?
Hurin could go to him like in the final stages, like when they're staging to get ready for this, and be like, are we doing the right thing? Is this the right thing to do? And Huor's kind of like, you got to fight the bad guys.
Right. Well, see, here's the thing.
Hurin could be asking him, is this the best thing for our people? And Huor's like, I can't tell you that. That's not what we're doing here.
Right. Because see, if Huor is the voice of Estel, right, Day Shall Come Again is the great, like battle cry of Estel, right? And it's after Huor's death. So if we have I think it would be most powerful if we can hear the influence of Huor. Like basically, if the moment when Hurin is crying out, "Day shall come again," that's an actual departure for Hurin. Like the moment when he himself is like when Huor is dead now and he's lost everything. When he now in that last moment as he's going to be captured, and realizes the end is upon him. Like it's like now he finally gets what his brother has been saying all along, and and we can hear and feel Huor's influence in that last moment. Yeah, something like that. G.D. Taurin was saying, Huor spends the whole season trying to teach Hurin about Estel, and he doesn't get it. Yeah, that he's more focused on Amdir, right? On
And Hurin's gonna need some Estel where he's headed.
Exactly. So, and as I say, that last, and so even the way in which, of course, the beautiful plays on the day has come, right? Yeah, the daytime stuff, which sort of culminates in Day Shall Come Again. If we can see in Hurin, like the original day statements, they're all Amdir statements, right? And then his bringing it back around again in the end is a shift on Hurin's part, a shift from Amdir to Estel.
Right. So Huor will have to have been talking about something throughout the season that Hurin just didn't get. And he'll have to have his own motif that he returns to. And if it probably can't be the day thing, because day's going to be Hurin's thing. And
right.
The day is here and I'm the guy and all that, right? But with Huor, we know he says, "From you and me, a new star shall arise." He's into stars.
Right.
Like we can have him say things about stars when Hurin's talking about day, and somehow get that there.
Yeah, I think in the end, I mean, Nick, I'm thinking about what you were about, like advice that he would give to Hurin and stuff, right? I mean, at the end of the day, he's going to be like, if Hurin is asking him, how can we make sure we win? What can we do to guarantee victory? Huor is going to be like, can't, right? But it's okay, right? That's not the point, right? That's not.
I'm pretty sure what Huor would say to him is, well, what does it matter? You're gonna fight anyway. Like, we know you're doing this.
Right.
Like, and he's like, no, but I want to do it right for our people and to win and all this. And Huor's like,
yeah,
okay, I hear you.
The step that Huor would have is like, this is the right thing to do, and we're doing it. We do the right thing for the right reasons, but then we just outcomes. We trust outcomes, right? Huor becomes the master of like the, Sam Gamgee Estelle of like, I'm just gonna go to sleep, right? Because, and just trust, right?
Yeah.
So again, Huor it's not like he becomes apathetic. Like, it doesn't matter if we attack or not, whatever, it's all good. It's not about fatalism. It's about trust. It's about that, like, outcomes are beyond our so again, like, to an Amdir perspective, the Near-Ninth Arnadiad is an utter and complete disaster, right? From an Estelle perspective, it's not. It's a sad chapter in a longer story, which is still going to come out right? And he trusts that. And so again, like the purest statement of the purest like attitude of Estelle is, again, like Sam's, like, I don't know what's going to happen to me, right? I'm probably going to die. I'm almost certainly going to die, right? But at the end of the day, that's not the big deal, right? Because I believe in the, that the larger story of which I'm part is gonna have its right ending, right? I'm gonna trust in that. Some kind of statement of Estelle like this, not just the famous prophecy to Turgon, but some kind of statement of Estelle to Hurin, as they're all clearly going to die in the Fens of... When it becomes clear to all of them that they're going to die in the Fens of Serech, right? Hurin can be apologizing, right? Like, I led us to disaster, right? We're all going to die. I failed as a leader. Our people have failed. Everything is... The Elf King failed. Everyone has failed, and everything has fallen, and everything... This is a complete disaster, right? And Huor to be like, no, no, it's, I mean, yes, but no, like, it's, you haven't failed, right? Things haven't failed. This is not darkness winning, right? This is not darkness winning.
About how Hurin's not conquered yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like they can fight you as much as they want, but you're never going to be conquered.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and then again, so and this is where this takes root in Hurin, and this is where like day shall come again comes from. Like the darkness is falling, right? But day shall come again. He is speaking in the end the lesson that his brother taught him, and the final teaching can be right there, right before he takes an arrow in the face. Yeah. Okay. I like it. Yeah. Who are the contemplative poet, mystic Estelle dude? I like this. And Nick, you know what my favorite part of this idea, of your Huor concept is? It's a delightful kind of self-referential thing, right? Like, we get almost no lines from Huor. We get almost no independent stories of Huor.
Yeah.
Well, of course not, because he's a really quiet guy, right? That's why he doesn't get many quotes.
Stuff.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun. So yeah. Okay. Let's talk about Morwin. I'm actually going to the Morwin slide now. Okay. What's her role in Hurin's development? We've just been talking about what Huor contributes, right? How we will see Hurin begin the season having this like fire lit under him, right? Where he becomes this highly motivated go-getter, inspired by like his take home, right, from the Fingolfin story is Morgoth is not unassailable, right? Which obviously fits with the Beren and Luthien lesson that, you know, Maedhros is learning here, right? Morgoth is not unassailable. So Hurin is going to come in with a different angle on that same story, right? Just as Fingon and Maedhros are talking, and Maedhros is like, hey, look, if Luthien and Beren can get in there, we can make this happen, right? Morgoth is not unassailable. And then Hurin comes out with the Fingolfin story and is like, hey, guys, Morgoth, totally not unassailable, right? Like, he's still walking with a limp after what Fingolfin did to him. If we all get together, we could take that guy down, right? So Hurin has this fire with that. But again, he's very achievement focused, very Amdir focused. He's learning Estel from Huor. What does he get from Morwin? What is Morwin? Morwin is...
I imagine that Morwin is someone who can challenge him.
She's strong.
She definitely seems like the type of person who would speak her mind.
Yeah.
And if she didn't agree with what he was doing, she would let him know. So
Morwin is immovable. I mean, like, right. She is... Yeah.
Right. So he would trust that if he's trying to do his different things and everything, and she doesn't like it, she's going to reset him.
Yeah.
Hurin and get him in the right direction.
Force, and Morwin is the immovable object. Right.
Right. They're which means they probably have a rather difficult relationship.
Probably.
I can't imagine that the two of them are just like, we get along all the time, and we're just happy together, and we just love each other so much.
Yeah.
Like, they don't really
There'd be
seem
some
like
fireworks there. Yeah.
They don't seem like a cutesy couple, right?
No, I agree.
Nothing about them is that.
Huor and Rian, yes.
Sure, that's different. Yeah. There's a little bit of an age gap there, and
he's all soulful, and she's into it, right? And yeah.
She's very dramatic about it too. Like, she just cannot live without him. Like, I have to have him in my life. If I don't have him in my life, I just cannot live.
Yeah, I get it. Morwin, more detached, more detached.
Well, mature too.
Mature, yeah.
I mean, that's part of it, is that Morwin's 30 when the Nirnaeth happens, whereas Rian's only 24 or something like that. Right. So there's that. But the real issue is that we will have plenty of time with Morwin and Hurin on screen to develop this relationship. So we don't have to give them like one note and be like, this is how they are together. We can show what they're like at the beginning, and then as time goes on and how it develops and when they decide to have kids and how they react to their grief over the loss of their daughter. Like, there's a lot that happens for them, and we can see their love grow over time and weather some challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the death of the child is a really good point. Morwin... Morwin's, she will speak her mind, but I would think she's rather an introvert, kind of a loner. I get this sense, again, most of this sense, of course, I'm getting from the Turin story, which is where we learn most about Morwin, right? But the sense of her holding herself aloof, of her to everybody, not just to the Easterlings, but even seeming unapproachable, right? Almost not even like, is she even really a human being, right? Or is she there's something elvish about her and not just her beauty.
Well, I mean, part of that has to do with her history. She was born in Ladros, moved to Brethil as a refugee.
Yeah,
that lasted for a while, and eventually people in Brethil were like, could you maybe all, leave? and then they went to Dorloman. So she's on her third home.
Yep.
Her people have no real right to be there. They are outsiders. Like, they were not part of the people of Brethil, and they're not part of the people of Dorloman. So how do they fit? And it would not be that surprising to me if she is viewed as aloof simply because she's not from there, not part of that.
Yep. Whereas Hurin is the more like flamboyant personality who is always the center of attention in the room. Morwin is not, right?
Yeah, and he has the right to be there, even though he grew up in Brethil, and even though he's been to Gondolin, and therefore he's a bit of an outsider, and his people might be like, "Who are you coming back here now?" He has the right to be there.
Yeah,
and so he feels comfortable and at home in a way that the people from the House of Bayard don't.
Yeah, I love the suggestions that G.D. Tarrant is making here about the death of Lilith and how it could be a moment of near despair for Hurin. Like Hurin loses his Amdir, right? Whereas Morwin helps him, as G. Tarrant says, to stay focused, right? Like it's the death of Lilith hits Hurin really, really hard and feels to him like a sign of doom to come. Right. Because of course it is kind of a wake up call, right? I mean, he's all been blowing the, like, Morgoth is not unassailable. We will take on the darkness. And then like the plague comes and his daughter dies. And it's gotta be this moment of like, oh, okay, so actually I'm opposing,
something pretty powerful,
something way out of my league. Right.
Yeah.
That can cause plagues hundreds of miles away. And maybe this is, so, and obviously it's a highly emotional thing, the death of his child, and not just a mere like tactical reassessment of his position. But basically that it leads him, he is in his grief tempted to despair, right? Tempted to give up, that this is like, he can't, like, it's all gonna, Lilith is dead. The laughter is dead. Their joy is gone. How can they win? And Morwin holds him, to his resolution.
If anything, I would have to think that the people of Dorloman probably weren't super keen on let's all go fight Morgoth when Hurin showed up. I mean, yes, they opposed Morgoth and they are allies of the High King of the Elves. Should there be a war, they're joining up, but they're not like eager for it necessarily.
Right.
The plague probably changes that. If the Dark Lord's attacking them, time to attack back. Like everyone who lost a family member now has a very personal reason to go fight Morgoth, right? So there's a way in which the plague could be very galvanizing.
And actually, I like that from Morwin, basically.
And if she is like, look, this guy took our daughter.
Right.
You're allowed to go kill him now.
Right. Her response is, yes, you're right. Morgoth has killed our child, and we're not going to take that. We're not just going to sit here and take it. Right.
Yeah. And
that reconfigures his perspective on things. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And again, and she's the one with the refugee experience, right? It's time to take a stand, right? Would be her. So she would, when we talked about tension and conflict potentially between Hurin and Morwin, it wouldn't be that he wants to go fight Morgoth and she resists that. She would be with him in,
at that point.
Yeah.
I think her views of that are probably going to change over time. From at the beginning when he was just talking about it, like, oh sure, honey, you can totally go fight Morgoth someday, whatever. Like it's this thing that's not actually
happening. It's never going to happen. Yeah.
Right. It's not real. It's not real.
Yeah.
So she can support him very superficially at first because she hasn't really taken it seriously.
Right.
And then at this point, she's like, no, I really want you to do that. And then maybe when it's actually happening, I mean, you know, sending your husband off to war in a war where probably a lot of people are going to die, that's a different thing than, yeah, you go get that guy, right? It's a bit more of a emotional leave taking, I would think.
Yeah, I agree, but I think I can't see her wavering.
She's not going to go back.
Yeah.
It's just now she has to experience those emotions. Whereas it's not just the anger and the revenge. Now it's okay, this is terrifying, but yes, you need to go do the thing.
Yeah. Now, stubborn and resolute is Morwin. What would they fight over, Hurin and Morwin? I like the idea of, because I mean, they're two very strong-willed people. They would totally fight. What would they fight over?
She is from a culture that has a history of wise women serving as leaders and making important decisions. He's from a culture where, have we met any women in this culture yet? I mean, there were women around.
Probably,
some of them might
presumably.
have had names.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about any of them because this entire culture is Hador likes to fight. Like,
right.
This is not a culture that has had women leaders or women in respected roles in the community. It's the most patriarchal of the houses of the Adain. And Morwin is not here for the patriarchy.
Especially since it's not going to be hard to put her, I mean, to argue that she would be the next generation leader of, I mean, after
Emeldir?
After Emeldir, yeah.
So one of the things that
she could have been trained up by Emeldir to be the next leader.
Yeah. And she would then be in possession of Narsil. Just saying. But one of the things that we could do is essentially that the House of Beor has now come to live in Dorloman, and like there's some push and pull between integration and, you know, now they come under the authority of the Lord of Dorloman. Well, how much autonomy do they have right now? And so there could be some political push and pull even between the two of them. We don't, because we've kind of shied away in a lot of times from overtly saying women are not equals to men in these cultures. We haven't really done a lot with that. We certainly haven't said anything about that.
Well, in the case of the Haladine, it wasn't true, so that's why we didn't say it there.
Right. Well, that's my point, though. Is that
but in the House of Hador, I think we have said it by not having had women have any role at all in any of the stories we've told.
I think that's great. I think having that kind of cultural difference is excellent. What are we going to do with Emeldir?
She will need to die at some point.
Right. She could die sooner rather than later.
If you'd liked her to die this season, we could have that happen. She's not going to die of old age this season. I forget how old she is at this point, but she's probably in her 50s or something.
Yeah, she's not old, but
she's not old age. So if we do kill her off this season, it would have to be an accident, the plague. She gets killed doing something dangerous.
The situation I'm imagining in Brethil, Morwin was basically taken under Emeldir's wing, right? So Morwin is essentially the heir apparent to Emeldir within the Beorian culture.
Yes.
I want to get rid of Emeldir when they go up to Dorloman. So that in Dorloman, young Morwin is essentially the kind of heir, you know, the leader presumptive, the one to whom the House of Beor, the Beorians who go into the north, look to. Maybe not official because she's still young, right? And it's weird.
She's 20.
Right. I mean, which is fine, but like everyone knew that she was the apprentice of you know, that Emeldir meant her to be the next leader. And And they do respect Morwin, and they see in Morwin the potential for a great leader. But also they're moving to Dorloman, and they're not going to be independent, right? Mm-hmm. So they've sworn fealty to the king of to Galdor, and so they're not going to. She's not going to be officially their leader, but like she's totally unofficially going to be their leader, right?
So what if Emildir shows up on the scene, and she's kind of running the Baorian autonomous enclave, right?
Yeah.
And nobody questions that because the people of Hador, the House of Hador, are the ones who give her the appellation man-hearted.
They're like,
because they don't.
It's okay because she's practically a man.
She's practically a man.
Practically
right?
a man. Yeah.
It's like King Hatshepsut, right?
Right. She shows up wearing a sword. Like she's a dude, as far as they're concerned. Right.
Functionally,
But Morwin is not that kind of woman. Like she doesn't present herself in that way. And so she doesn't garner the same kind of...
And she's so young.
Right. So she doesn't get that kind of...
respect.
Well, you're okay.
Right.
Kind of thing. Right? And so there's no... The people of Hador have no expectation that Morwin would be the person. Like, to the Baorians, it seems...
Yeah.
Right. It's a no-brainer. Like, obviously, Morwin, she's been set up like this. She's the person, right?
Yeah.
But the people of Hador have no... Like, that wouldn't even occur to them.
And when Hurin himself becomes king, it becomes a point of tension, right?
Yes.
There's this subsection of his people who come to his wife and defer to his wife. And it's weird. From a Hadorian perspective, it's weird.
It is, but it also brings up the question of why they got married in the first place. Because we've already shown the double wedding as a essentially political wedding.
Yeah.
And if she's the presumptive leader of the House of Baor, who doesn't really have any right to live in Dorloman, and he's the, oh, look, your dad just died, leader of the House of Hador, who's not married yet, there's probably some pressure from various sides of, hey, if the two of them just got married, wouldn't that solve a lot of this?
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So here's my suggestion about that. My suggestion about that is that the people in Dorloman wouldn't care. Because the people of Baor are only, there's not that many of them, and they're kind of like, they're not a big deal, right? Necessarily. So it's not, so the Hurin's, the groom side of the room would not be looking at this marriage and being like, ooh, what an advantageous match for Hurin, right?
Right.
But the Baorians now, they would. So my suggestion is that they would be like, hey, Morwin, like, your greatest act of leadership, if you marry this guy, we're set, right? So they're like totally about allying to the people of Dorloman through Morwin, right?
Unless there's an understanding amongst the people of Hador that the Baorians are kind of they don't go through the proper channels first, and this is kind of their opportunity to remedy that, like to unite the power structure.
I think the people of Dorloman are very comfortable where they are.
I think so too.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, I don't think that they feel that the power structure needs to be solidified.
Okay.
There could be, I mean, certainly there could be a voice from the Hadorians who basically say, like, point out that it's cool, right? That like you are the product of a joining of Brethil and Dorloman, and now you would be joining your house to Baor as well. So perfect, right? That's lovely. That's nice. That would be good. But again, I don't think they're like, oh yeah, this will really help us, because they don't need help. Like, they're good. They're secure, and they're secure in their allegiance, to Fingon, right? To their their relationship with Fingon. That's where they get their solidity from.
So I guess the real question is, how comfortable are we in a situation where we're saying that to one side of this marriage it's a political marriage, and to the other side it really isn't?
I think it's kind of fun, right? So like, he's into her because she's hot.
Well, yeah, she's literally the most beautiful human woman ever.
Yeah, so like, there's a lot to recommend her there, and she's cool. I mean, and she's like got a presence.
Strong-willed. She speaks her mind. Very different from the other women in the House of Hador who maybe just sit there quietly and.
Yes.
Hurin's like, what do I do with this?
Yes, she's not going to be a Hadorian damsel, embroidering in the tower while her husband goes off to war. Like, that's not Morwin. And he could be into that, right? And it would fit his whole go-getter spirit, right? That he would like this prospect.
He picks her because he wants her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Her people are like, totally marry this guy.
Yeah, but
please.
2 thumbs up from us.
Right.
This is golden opportunity.
Morwin can agree to all of this this makes sense without necessarily wanting to be married to her.
The tension can be there. The tension can be how much is she into him.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's fine. Like, if we're asking the question, I think that's fine. I mean, I'm not suggesting that we actually make more.
She's not reluctant.
Yeah. No.
But more of the, okay, I could do that, I guess, instead of the like, I'm so in love with you and you're so wonderful.
It's important not to view this with too modern a perspective, because it would never
occur to them.
It would never necessarily occur to a woman in that position that to do something other than what was going to advantage her.
Yes.
People in her position.
Right. Agreed.
I mean, not to say it would never occur, but
but I agree. The whole the only reason to get married is warm, fuzzy feelings is a very modern idea. I think what you're saying, and I agree.
Right.
And
typically, traditionally, the idea that a marriage is not just about 2 people; it's about their families.
Right.
Yeah.
In her case, her family is the House of Bayor, who are these refugees living in Darlum, and she's going to feel beholden to them.
And also remember, there's another dynamic here, and that is Rian is all about Huor.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we have with Rian and Morwin and Huor is another double wedding situation.
Right, because Rian justifiably can't actually. There would be pressure for her to wait to marry until Morwin is married, even if they're not necessarily.
Yeah,
that's not going to be an issue. We're going to hold off on the Rian Huor wedding for some years. They cannot. Rian's like 13.
Okay.
Depends on how young Huor is.
He's 20.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be.
No, he does.
Huor? Why does he?
He's 3 years younger than Hurin.
I know, but why do they have to be older?
Why does who have to be older?
We're pushing them older than they are in the books.
Yeah.
Why?
I forget.
There's a reason.
There was a reason. You asked for it at one point.
I trust that there's a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. You originally said that you didn't buy that a couple of teenagers saying you have to let us go right now, Turkin, or we'll never have a chance to fight, made any sense. That they had to have been young men to be making that request.
Okay.
Yeah, but only one of them has to be.
Yeah, they're 3 years apart.
Right. Do they have to?
The point is, yes.
Okay.
Well, okay. What needs to happen is that Rian and Huor have an unborn child at the time of the battle.
Yeah.
Right.
So Rian's reaction to this is very much we are newlywed and we're just starting our family, and then all this terrible stuff happened. So their wedding takes place much closer to the end of the season, whereas Morwin and Hurin are going to get married at the beginning of the season, and Turin's going to be born and be 8 years old at the time of the battle.
That's fair enough.
That's what I'm trying to explain.
That's okay.
Yes.
That makes more sense. Okay.
I still want Rian desperately in love with Huor.
Oh yeah.
Oh, she can follow him around like a puppy dog the whole time. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm just saying they're not getting married for a few years yet.
But
that's all.
But it still introduces that
concept of a double wedding, right?
Right.
Like, my cousin married you. Can I marry his brother?
So Rian is like, I mean, she's all in, right?
Yeah.
And this provides us a nifty contrast with Morwin, right? Morwin doesn't have to be all in on Hurin. She can be plus minus on Hurin and the whole marriage situation.
Like, he's a decent enough guy. He may not even really. He might not even really think about her that much, and that's and I don't mean he doesn't think much of her. That's not what I mean.
Right.
Like, he's a king. She's his wife. That's important.
He's not focused on marriage.
Right. She's not hit the most important
thing
piece of his life.
Yeah.
That's
so
really.
She would become more important to him over time as he realizes what role she plays in his life.
Right.
But at first, she's just filling the checked the box, got a wife,
got married,
got
ready to have children.
Extra bonus.
Had an heir right away, and it's a son. What is bonus? I'm doing so good here. I'm checking off all the boxes.
Not to mention, married the hottest woman in the continent.
Ever.
So, like, that's also good, right?
So he thinks he's doing great with the whole marriage thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Morwin,
I mean, Baron had to come back from the dead to do what I'm doing all on my own.
Yeah. Morwin might have a different perspective on how the marriage is going.
100%.
At first. Yeah.
100%.
And so I think they need to
But she's doing what she's supposed to do also. Like, they're both kind of viewing this as, we're doing the thing we're supposed to do.
Except she wouldn't be viewing her role as the role she's supposed to have. Right. She would presume that they were going to have a partnership.
A partnership. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's frustrated. And he's like, I'm winning at everything. And
yes, exactly. What a great marriage we have. This is fantastic. Yeah.
And so it'll take a little time for him to notice that there's a problem there.
Right.
And when they probably have a few fights to get to that point.
Right.
Yeah.
But eventually they are going to get through this, because if we're having her be such a strong support to him through the death of a life, then they've got to have figured it out by then. Like, if they're raising kids and being that for one another.
Though that could also really be the moment when she becomes his partner.
Mm.
Yeah, like they could be very, like, people raise kids in that state all the time.
No, I know. I thought in this particular case, we wanted them to get past that.
Yeah. No, we do. But yeah, I'm not sure it has to happen as a separate event prior. I think the death of Lilith can be
the thing that causes
the turning point. The turning point in their marriage, as well as, like, so the fact that Hurin himself wavers, the fact that Hurin has these moments of despair after the death of Lilith, and she is the one who bolsters him and brings him through, is what changes his perspective on what his marriage brings to his life, basically.
So that it would be really interesting if that helps him gain respect for her, and so he starts bringing her in more, but it still takes him time to win her over, which doesn't happen until right before the end of their story. Like, and we had talked about the potentiality of him bringing Narsil into battle. If she gives that to him as he's heading up, like, that's like the ultimate sign of, yes, I believe in you. You're the guy, and that fulfills that arc.
Yes. I do agree. We want Morwin to be, I think we want Morwin to be completely, like, she and Hurin on the same page on the day he goes to battle.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. But I think it's important to extend that plot arc of their relationship as far into the season as possible.
Yep.
Because the further the the further it is into the season A, it will feel like we've earned this bigger payoff, and also it's going to be all the more devastating when the battle falls apart, right?
Yeah. Were you just suggesting also, by the way, that Hurin is wielding Narsil in battle at the Near Ninth?
Yes. We got to find a way to deal with that, obviously. I wasn't the first person to suggest this, by the way. This was somebody else's suggestion.
This leads to a challenge, but...
Yes.
Right, we need to keep Narsil out of the Hill of the Slain.
Yes.
Yeah.
But other than that, we can figure it out if that's what we want to do with it.
Yeah.
At the last point was Emeldir had it and took it to Dorleman, and that's where we've got with Narsil so far.
Yeah.
I'm fine with Emeldir giving it to Morwin. Oh, that's fine.
Before I forget about this, I do have an ideal for Anael and his son that we've introduced.
Oh yeah.
For this season, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll come back to Anael.
Yes.
Yeah, we will need Anael next season, so good to bring him in this season.
Yes.
And some connection to Huor would be fun. Anyway, just saying. Doesn't have to be. But anyway, okay. So this is great. I'm digging the Hurin and Morwin stuff. Okay. Oh, hey, look at that. We've only got one more slide, and we're only 20 minutes late. It's fine. So we talked a good bit about Hurin in the war. Actually, yeah, we talked about most of this stuff. I like it. The shift in Hurin's, so the things that are, so the fundamental thing that we're going to get from Hurin in episode 1, right? That he's going to get in Gondolin is going to be that the fire and the conviction that he can make a difference, right?
Yes.
The conviction and the determination to do the thing, right?
Fingolfin almost did it all by himself.
Right, Fingolfin, and it's not that Hurin has like delusions of grandeur and thinks that he can do what Fingolfin
personally
couldn't.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's not about that, but it's about like I'm gonna be a part of the team, right? And I'm gonna make this, so he has this drive. Like I said, he's the irresistible force, highly charismatic, can move people to follow him and do things, even, as we will see, can get elf kings to follow his advice, right? Highly charismatic guy. And he's gonna and driven, right? Driven to with he emerges from Gondolin with a vision, right? The vision.
Maedhros should admire him.
Yeah. Which is a shame that. Are they ever going to meet?
They're going to be meeting in councils. They're going to have to talk all this out.
Right. You don't plan this giant offensive without some interactions.
Right. Well, my question was just whether Maedhros was going to invite him, but I guess he would.
If Maedhros is visiting Fingen, Fingen 100%. Will have invited her in.
Yeah.
So they have the opportunity, whether or not we.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think Maedhros would appreciate it for sure. In fact, it would be a fun kind of almost anti-parallel, right? Like Maedhros' experience in Angband and having his hand cut off, right, is what leads to his like renewed fire and determination, whereas Hurin's experience in Gondolin. So like he has a good experience, right?
Yeah, and Hurin's fire and determination is what lands him hanging on the side of Angband.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Beautiful.
Seesaw.
Yeah.
So that drive, the charisma, the drive, the determination, the vision for fighting Morgoth, this is sort of the constant for Hurin, right? But the arcs, the trajectories that we were talking about with his character, basically focus on Morwin and Huor, right?
Yeah. Because he's got to come over to the realization that I don't have to be the guy.
Yeah.
For this to happen.
And that, I think, is the lesson he learns from Morwin, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like in Morwin he actually has a peer himself, right? A partner whom he needs and who can help him. With Huor, he's learning Estelle, right? And whereas again he's focused on his Amdir. Vision is Amdir in one sense, right? Like to have a vision for something is essentially to say, like, I have Amdir that I can accomplish this, right? So that's where he kind of begins, right? He's the man with the plan at the beginning. That's gonna fall apart. Like begin to question and then drop off a cliff in the last couple episodes during the near night, not just at the end of not just in the Fens of Serech, right? But from
the death of Fingon is part of that too.
Yeah.
Well, from the charge of Fingon, right?
The whole battle not going according to plan, and then them losing, and all these people dying.
Yeah. From the beginning of the battle,
it's all his fault.
Yeah, from the opening stages of the battle through the death of Fingon and down into the Fens of Serech, his Amdir is taking hit after hit, right?
Yeah.
But it's already taken a major hit from Lilith's death as well. So again, that is really, Lilith's death really is shaping out to become the turning point, right? For him almost entirely. It's the turning point of his relationship with Morwin. And also it can be the kind of initial turning point of the first time he really questions his Amdir, and has to, in some way, begin relying on Estelle as well, or at least to like see it even for the first time.
Right. Yeah, because we can't have him be like, I'm Amdir guy the whole season until the very last minute when I'm like, oh no, now I've got to be Estelle because we lost. Like we do have to see him growing into that role, and I think we can do it that way.
So it's
whereas Huor's arc is more about where do I find my role in this, because he can be kind of like going with the flow, right? He may be kind of reticent to leave Gondolin, but he goes with his brother and their cousin, and he goes along with the fight against Morgoth, because you have to fight the bad guys.
Man, I can see why Tolkien put in so many threes like this are awesome. Right?
Yeah.
Like you've got the two guys who want to leave, but for totally different reasons, right? In Handir and Hurin, the stories that we had there, and then the one guy who wants to stay, right? But will leave because the others are leaving too, and he doesn't want to abandon his brother. He knows it would be an abdication of his own role and responsibility. If he were to stay.
Has a duty to his people.
He does have a duty. Yeah. But he doesn't want to go, right? He's the only one of the three who doesn't want to go, right? So anyway, I
feel like someone could really make a life for themselves here. You know,
that would be great. You know, I'm not saying me, but some other human could really settle down and make something of themselves here. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So it's so cool, like that. Yeah. You can do things with pairings, right?
Yeah.
But threes are it's so much richer to have, sets of three like this.
That's how you can get people outvoted. You can't outvote anybody if it's two people.
Right. If you just have two, and also with pairs, there's always the temptation just to make them opposites. Right. Like one says yes, but the other says no. And instead when you've got three, then you've got a much more nuanced situation. It's not just two say yes and one say no. It's
one of the challenges with Huor is that if we weren't careful, he was just going to be the guy who has the other opinion in the room.
Yeah.
Right. He was just going to be not a character, even just person who voices things that need to be voiced.
Yeah. Person that Hurin is talking to.
Right. Right. So like that would be the worst thing we could do with him, I think.
And now Handir is going to be the lieutenant that we use in order to have those conversations, whereas Huor gets his actual own perspective that matters.
And then with a Tolkien story, it's like, okay, we have these two brothers and they're different. It's like, okay, so they're Boromir and Faramir.
Right.
Right. Like that's what you would do with it.
And which is still kind of that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, Faramir is the wizard's pupil who likes history and such, and now Huor is the contemplative younger brother. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. It's not identical, but it's certainly
but it's not
identical.
And there has to be a reason for it, something we're doing with it, and so that it doesn't just fall into default. Well, that's what we've got.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm loving the Hondir thing. I think that's nice, and it does give somebody to be in that place of like fellow commander, even just to leave Hurin not. Again, he's never going to be alone. He'll always have Huor with him. But again, in that sense in which Huor doesn't count, like he's instead of having like, and now here's the leaders of all of the armies, and it's Hurin and a whole bunch of elves, right? Hondir also would be an independent commander there leading a force of humans. And so having that other voice there, I think that's good in a lot of ways.
It'll be helpful.
Yeah. Little side note, Adola was just pointing out something very sensible, which may have come up on the discussion boards and stuff, that, of course, if there's one character that Anaio needs to connect with during this season, it's Rian. In order to explain why Rian goes to him.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
But we can.
Anyway, but I just that seems to me perfectly sensible that needs to be, because, why would that happen?
Right.
But anyway,
something has to lead to that. Yeah.
Something has to lead to that. Like there's clearly a backstory as to why you leave your baby with him. Okay. Anyway, yeah, we'll do a minor character wrap up storyline thing, and Anael is obviously a candidate for that episode. But good. I'm feeling good about Hurin's progression here. And I'm loving the Hondir thing. I'm loving the Huor thing. And by the way, I think that Huor should be like phenomenal in battle. I think Huor should be like
he's a warrior poet.
Yeah, warrior poet. Yeah, he's yeah. Oh man, like tall, dark, handsome, studly, but like sensitive and poetic. No wonder Rihanna's just like can't get over it, right?
And Hurin should be cast like the way that Wolverine should have been cast.
Oh, of course. Right. Yeah. No, I see just what you mean.
I don't have any personal feelings about this in any way.
I can tell. It doesn't sound like an invitation to a rant at all.
No.
Yeah.
Even a little bit.
Anyway, we'll talk about the castings. The casting, there'll be some serious casting considerations, obviously.
I don't care who it is. Right.
Right. Okay. Great. So
we're definitely putting Hugh Jackman on there. Just driving Nick now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we know whom to nominate then. So it's that's good. That's good. Okay. Excellent. So next time, we're going to be basically looking at, well, not just the elf side of the story, but we're going to be looking at the larger elf, the primary union of Maedhros storyline. So we'll be thinking about this from the Feanorian, Maedhros and the Feanorians' perspective. We'll be thinking about this from Fingon's perspective. We'll be developing more Turgon's perspective and his decision making there. And indirectly, we're not going to have another session where we talk about the Easterlings, because we did that pretty thoroughly, that storyline pretty thoroughly. I mean, goodness, we almost outlined that sucker when we got to the end of that. Like, that was pretty thorough. So, but certainly we can kind of fold that in to some extent in thinking about how the Union of Mithros is going to move forward. And then after the Union of Mithros, then we'll do our miscellaneous minor characters and what's happening in other regions during this time that we usually do, even if it doesn't make it much into the episodes. And then we'll be ready to start thinking through, outline for the season, right? Probably after that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Assuming we actually get through all those things in the episodes the sessions we have set aside for them. Good. Awesome. Feeling good about Hurin. That was fun. Looking forward to thinking through, especially Mithros and Fingon here for the elves here as we plan the union. All right. Thank you, guys. That was a fun discussion. Appreciate the comments from the viewers here tonight. Some really good and suggestive ideas. And we'll be back in 2 weeks on the 30th of November as we continue to live our charmed SilmFilm life, where we've yet to miss a week in season 7. So there we go. All right. Thanks, everybody. Of course, now we're coming up to the holidays, so that's likely to end, but that's okay. That's a normal planned thing. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll say, as always, thanks for listening, and Godspeed.